G'day my gorgeous people and welcome back to Politics Made OK. Before we jump in, go ahead and subscribe to the channel immediately because, well, I really want you to. Plus, you really don't want to miss a single moment of the behind the scenes action I'm going to bring you from Parliament, including how the Deputy Prime Minister doesn't seem to know how to finish a press conference without one of his staff yelling out, "Last question!" to signal the press conference is coming to an end.
This building. Yeah, you gotta say. Yeah. So, last question. Okay, rightio, thanks.
Yep, that man is the acting Prime Minister of our country right now. The same man who became the leader of the National Party, making him the Deputy Prime Minister, not so long ago. And when I asked him, were you planning this leadership spill for a few months, Barnaby? He told me...
Well, if I thought it was something that I expected to happen, I would have brought my hat.
That's a normal response to being asked if you were planning a leadership spill, right? To be fair, the man has a thing with hats.
Living in the country.
What, the Deputy Prime Minister can wear one and I can't? Yeah, maybe just a bit too big, right? What about... Ooh, yes, this is a vibe. I'm Madeline. Yep. So yes, Barnaby I Like Hats Joyce is our acting Prime Minister this week. And that's because Scott Morrison has left the building and touched down in the US last Monday. The French government has also just turned up the drama a little bit and also left the building. And by that I mean their ambassador to Australia has just, well, up and left after we sunk a really pricey submarine deal with them. You see what I did there? Sunk. Guys, I have a whole other job on top of this. Wordplay is not easy. Really, the French scenario just makes me feel a whole lot better about myself because people call me dramatic. And yet here are the French who are just yeah, that ain't gonna fly, and just mic drop it out of there. In fact, I want to get amongst this. Do my own mic drop. Just pow. That is attached to me. Welcome to another fantastic and very professional show of Politics Made OK. We sure I can't pull this off? No? No. Okay. Now, before you ask, yes, we have had an earthquake this week. And yes, some people felt it, right here in Canberra. I wasn't one of them. It's going to be pretty interesting though, because it's done a lot of damage in Victoria. You know, the state that's had to shut down its construction industry because of all the protests by the tradies. 2021 people, it just keeps on giving. Something I definitely did feel here on the Hill was the absence of Scott Morrison this week. That's right, we are Scott Morrison-less. He's still alive. He's just flown to the US of A for this really important quad meeting and to meet up with old mate Joe Biden. About 12 hours before he took off though, he went ahead and announced that he had accepted the resignation of one of his federal ministers.
He has this afternoon taken the appropriate course of action to uphold those standards by tendering his resignation as a minister this afternoon, and I have accepted his resignation. Minister Porter will be returning to the backbench where he will continue to serve as the member for Pearce. But I thank him for his service in our government to the people of Australia.
That's right, this week we have had another federal minister hit the dust. Welcome to federal politics. Before you go ahead though and imagine Christian Porter just languishing away on a couch, handing a bag of chips, it's important to know that he has resigned as a minister, but he's still a member of Parliament. So he won't be part of Scott Morrison's cabinet or making any big announcements, but he'll still represent the people of Pearce in WA on the backbench. A bit of history on Christian Porter and how this whole resignation happened. Porter's kind of Liberal Party royalty. His dad, Charles Chiller Porter, was the State Secretary of the WA Liberal Party, and before that he was, competing in the Olympics for high jump. It's just really setting the bar high, isn't he? No? Okay. And Chiller's dad before him set up what would become the Queensland State Liberal Party. Even as a teenager, Porter was touted by family and friends as a future Prime Minister. He went to law school at the University of WA and could have gone on to get a teaching position, but instead worked at one of the top law firms in the state. He even made an appearance in Clio's Most Eligible Bachelors in 1999. Yeah, there's him right there. And to go with it, he also drew a pretty ambitious self-portrait. From there, he went on to state politics and then federal parliament and eventually became the Attorney General of Australia. That's like the highest lawmaker in the land. Not bad. But Porter's unstoppable ascent ground to a halt after the ABC published an explosive story earlier this year. The story basically aired allegations that an unnamed cabinet minister had raped a young woman while the two of them were on a debating trip back when they were just teenagers. Fast forward a couple of days and Porter announces he's the cabinet minister who's being accused of all of this, but strenuously denied anything like this ever happened. He went on to take the ABC to court for seriously damaging his reputation. I mean, fair enough. And that whole court case resulted in the ABC not exactly apologising to Porter or like paying him out a bunch of money, but putting a little amendment at the bottom of their article. And that little note said that they didn't intend to imply Porter to be the minister accused of any of this. It also resulted in Porter racking up quite the legal bill, as in $1 million. And who paid for that? We don't know. And neither does Porter. The money was covered by something called a blind trust, an anonymous donor or donors that have just forked out the cash to Porter without identifying themselves. Yeah, potentially a bit dodgy, right? Now, Porter did disclose that a blind trust had covered his bill, but he refused to identify them or ask them to identify themselves, and he also refused to pay back the money. Instead, as questions were raised about if this breaches ministerial standards, and the Prime Minister ended up seeking advice for if it really did, Porter went ahead and just resigned. He said he just couldn't get the blind trust to identify itself, or else they'd face the same wrath of the angry Twitter mob that he'd faced following these accusations. So, we've got a minister down. Energy Minister Angus Taylor will be acting for Christian Porter's portfolio, which was, by the way, industry, science and technology. But the PM will have to do a reshuffle. You know, shuffling all those ministers around to different portfolios, maybe giving one or two people a promotion. And that'll be his 4th reshuffle this year. Tiring work, right? But not as tiring as flying all the way to America this week and meeting the Quad. Yeah, I said it was tiring to make myself feel better about not travelling. I bet it's awesome. Jealousy aside, the PM sat down with Joe Biden and the leaders of India and Japan to meet with this thing called the Quad, which is a group of countries who get together to mainly talk about one big thing. China. Who said that? So the PM went overseas to champion Australia's international relationship, but not before pretty much torpedoing one of its close friendships. See what I did there? Torpedo. That's another submarine joke. Come on guys, you gotta be picking up what I'm putting down. Pick it up. Last week I took you through this really big new partnership between Australia, the UK and the US called AUKUS. The centrepiece of this partnership is for the UK and the US to share their technology with Australia for nuclear submarines. Yay! New technology, right? Yay! Submarines! It was a good thing, right? Sure. But not everyone was so happy about it. And by not everyone, I mean the French. You see, a few years ago, Australia actually signed an agreement with France that it would buy submarines off them. Those submarines, called the Attack class, were not nuclear powered. Anyway, it would have cost us about $90 billion to buy and build all 12 of them. And everything kind of seemed on track. Yes, there was criticism that it was probably going to be over budget and over time. But the Defence Minister and Foreign Minister, as recently as last month, beefed up their defence cooperation with France, and there was no whiff of them calling off this deal. So it was a pretty big surprise that last week Australia signed on to a new deal with the UK and the US and just said bye-bye to the French project. And let me tell you, the French were not happy, Jan. They were so mad that they even recalled their ambassadors from Australia and America back to France. The French ambassador to Australia, Jean-Pierre Thibault, even told ABC that this is not an Australian attitude towards friends, and maybe we're not friends. Spicy. Can you imagine how the call between Australia and France would have gone down, which apparently happened the night before that deal? You would have had Australia just hey there, old buddy, old pal, old friend. And the French just like, bonjour. Yeah. Anyway, you know how we have that $90 billion deal for those submarines? Yeah, look, it's not that we don't, like, love the submarines. We do, love them a lot. Or that we don't like you. I mean, you're great. But we're just gonna go with this other plan, with the US and UK. You understand. Pardon? Yeah, it's actually got a really cool acronym, AUKUS. It's gonna be really great. Anyway, no hard feelings, right? Well, if you added France to this AUKUS, you would capture what you've done to us. What? You know, AUKUS, you add France and the F to the beginning and you've got us. Yeah, I haven't seen a country this mad at Australia since, you know, all of that drama with that other guy. China. I should get a COVID test. Anyway, that is a wrap for this week's show. Please like and subscribe to the channel, check me out on socials, and go ahead and listen to a podcast I've got with my mate Amanda Kopp called Bubble Pop for another explainer on what's going on up here on the hill. I'm Sarah Ison and I'll catch you next week for another show of Politics Made Okay. Yeah, I can pull this off.